The MacBook Air for 2020 has been my first real experience with macOS and Mac laptops since I stopped using my MacBook Pro in 2017. Then I switched completely to PC, but now when I got the opportunity to buy and try a MacBook Pro 2020 before handing this on to my employee that just started, I was really curious to see what would I think about a MacBook Air and what would I think about macOS in general. I'm W2Best, I make videos about tech travel and inspiration, and if you like this kind of content, I would be really happy if you want to subscribe to this channel. That helps me out a lot and gives me all the motivation I need to keep putting out content on a weekly basis. I have now been using the MacBook Air 2020 for a bunch of different use cases, but not as my main driver. However, I used it every single day the last 2 weeks, so I've got a pretty good impression of the laptop and what are the positives and negatives about it. Let's get right into it. This is the base model of the MacBook Air for 2020, and it comes with a 1.1 GHz dual-core 4-thread Intel Core i3 CPU. It comes with 8 GB of 3733 MHz LPDDR4X RAM and 256 GB PCIe SSD. It also comes with Intel Iris Plus graphics, which actually gives a bit of a boost in GPU-intensive tasks over the usual Intel UHD graphics. And if you wonder about the color specification, this is the gold color version. I have mainly been using the laptop with browsing, consuming content, and then testing out some different softwares to see how it can do with, for example, video editing and stress testing. I have been testing out the keyboard a lot, the trackpad a lot, and trying to make as much as possible use of the screen to see how it works in different conditions. The overall quality feel of the laptop is very good. It feels a little bit heavier than what I would first imagine such a small laptop to be, but since it's an all-metal chassis, that kind of adds to the overall quality feel of it, and both when you're carrying it closed up like this, and when you open it up and carry it in one of the corners, you really get like a super solid feeling from it. It's rare to feel something that is this high quality with any of the laptop manufacturers that I have been trying before. This you can also get a good impression of when I press down hard on the keyboard. You can see there's not a lot of keyboard flex. It's a very sturdy feeling. It's not completely stiff, but it's very close to it. For sure, there is quality feel enough that you can carry the laptop with holding onto the screen like this, and it doesn't bend a lot from it. Also, there's not a lot of screen flex, as you can see here. When I bend pretty hard on the screen, it does not give a lot away. The port situation is a little bit sad. On the left hand side you have two USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports, which is all fine if it wasn't for the fact that these are the only ports you get basically. On the right hand side you do actually though have a 3.5mm headphone jack. This makes it different from the new Asus Ultrabooks, which come without the 3.5mm headphone microphone combo jack. Since the laptop has two USB-C ports, you can use it with an external monitor like this in a very mobile setup. And this is a 15.6-inch mobile monitor that runs with just one USB-C cable. So I can still be plugged in to power, as you see there, but also be plugged in with the USB-C screen, making this a very nice mobile kind of productivity setup. The laptop weighs in at 1,275 grams. Together with the included charger and cable, it weighs in at 1,445 grams. This charge brick is really small and I like it a lot. However, it's only a 30-watt charger, so it's not super fast to charge up the battery. I also tried it out with a few other chargers, for example my Lenovo Yoga Slim 7 charger, and it charges just fine with all the USB-C chargers I tried it with. How about opening the laptop with one hand? That is a very smooth process. There is a fingerprint reader and it is really fast. As you can see there, I was immediately logged in. There is a bit of wobble from the screen though, and you can see that even when you just move it around like this. When the screen starts vibrating like this, it takes quite a while for it to slow down. So this is the price of having a less stiff hinge. The quality feel of the palm rest here is actually really good, like super high quality metal palm rest. The only thing I found a bit annoying is that the edges here are a bit sharp, so when I lean my hands on it to type on the keyboard, I would actually like have a bit of a sharp edge that pushes into the downside of my hand. The screen area picks up some fingerprints, and they are a bit hard to get rid of, I found. However, the outside doesn't really pick up much fingerprint except the Apple logo, which is quite sensitive to be fingerprinted. The metal chassis is super nice and I really like this color. I think it gives out a very professional and sleek look in general. Let's look a bit more close up on the screen. The screen is a 16:10 aspect ratio, so it got a little bit higher screen than your average 16:9 that is very common in Full HD laptops. This is also a higher resolution monitor, so here you got the Retina display with 2560 times 1600 pixels in the display. And comparing this to a regular Full HD monitor, you can really feel a difference. You see when you look at pictures and text that it is really sharp, and it is sharper than a regular Full HD monitor for sure. It does also make a bit of difference in everyday use. This is the max brightness of the screen, and I will say for sure that this is bright enough. I don't have a tool to test how bright the screen is, but I would estimate that it is around 400 nits. The screen is also for sure colorful enough to do some video and photo editing and for any kind of media consumption. However, when consuming media, as you can see here, you get quite a bit of extra black borders in the top and in the bottom, since this is a 16:10 aspect ratio. The monitor quality also seems to be pretty good, which you can see when running this backlight bleed test. I am so used to PCs always having quite a bit of backlight bleed down here towards the corner and sometimes up here in the top. This one doesn't seem to have any backlight bleed, even when I check it in a darker environment than this. The screen is glossy, and I am more of a fan of matte panels because of the less reflections they give when you use it in a bright or outdoors environment. But still, with this screen brightness, it can really work with a glossy screen. And I would be happy to use this screen for a lot of different activities that I use my laptop for. One of the things I dislike about the laptop and about the screen in particular is that it has such thick bezels around the screen here. So even though it has the 16:10 aspect ratio, there is a lot of space here that they could have filled out with more screen. This could easily have been a 14-inch laptop instead of a 13.3-inch laptop. Compare this to the bezel size of my Lenovo Yoga Slim 7, you can see that it has much slimmer bezels on the side and on the top, but about the same kind of bezel in total in the bottom. The speakers are front firing, as you can see here, just on the side of the keyboard. And these are really good speakers. I have been using the Lenovo Yoga Slim 7 for quite a while now, And I enjoy the speakers in the Yoga Slim 7 a lot, but I have to say these speakers actually pop even a bit more than the Yoga Slim 7. These have a lot more bass than the Yoga Slim 7, and it's actually amazing how such small speakers can give you that kind of immersive experience as they are doing. Sometimes there is a bit of tendency for the bass to distort a little bit, but as soon as you lower the volume down from max volume to a few steps below, this is not a problem anymore. One thing that a lot of people usually ask about laptops is how much noise is coming from it at idle state. And I have been leaning my ear in several times to this one, and when it's in this idle state, whether it's being charged or running on battery power, I can't hear any kind of coil whine. And the fans are normally never running, except when you stress test it, and even then, the fans are barely audible. So if a silent laptop is a priority for you, this one might be very good. Then it's also interesting to know that even when stress testing, there is no surface heat. So touching the laptop up top right here, you don't feel any heat coming from the chassis. This is the quality of the webcam, and as you can see, now I'm in a bit of a darker environment. It is in the evening, and the quality is relatively decent, but not perfect. This is like normal laptop cameras. You will use it for an occasional video call, but you won't be using it for anything more advanced than that. The trackpad is big and it works really well. It both tracks well, it has a really nice click to it, and it works super nice with gestures. The only thing that bothered me in the beginning was that I had to click down hard to be able to make it click. However, this was an easy fix by going into the settings for the trackpad and just enabling it with soft clicks. Then I use it with single tap to click and then double tap to right click, which is really a smooth way of handling the laptop. The keyboard has also been a very pleasant surprise. I get up to really fast typing speeds on this keyboard, and to be honest with you, I have nothing to complain about with the keyboard. It's got the right layout with the full-size enter key that I want to be able to type with a Nordic keyboard setup. It has ample spacing. I thought it was a bit too much space in between the keys at first, but it hasn't been a problem during this longer period of time. It has a little bit of travel. It's not a lot, but it's way more than the old butterfly switches, and it's enough to feel that you have activated the switch, and you get a little bit of response when the key goes back as well. The keyboard is backlit and can be adjusted in a lot of steps from the function 5 and the function 6 keys here. This is nice to see, as I find sometimes there's actually not that many levels available, and you can maybe choose between 2 different levels and there's actually not a very big difference. Here you can fine-tune the keyboard backlight in a much better way compared to the PC laptops I'm normally using. Pretty good experience. I am very impressed by the keyboard, and I'm positively surprised because I thought it would be the classic bad butterfly switches that were the case a few years ago with Mac laptops. When it comes to bloatware, it's a bit funny with macOS because it comes with a ton of pre-installed apps, but you actually think they provide some value, so it doesn't feel like it comes with bloatware. There are no random antivirus apps or stuff like this that gets included in most of the PC laptops nowadays. And there's nothing in the laptop that I actually want to uninstall when I got started with it at first. The overall experience in using macOS has been good. I was using macOS for a very long time before switching to PC and Windows about 3 years ago. So I'm very used to macOS and the experience since before, and it hasn't really changed that much. I like the overall feeling of the operating system, and I had a very easy time to get back into it, even though I think in general a few of my workflows that I use in the office are better with Windows than with Mac. The main reason why I decided to switch was that I wanted to be able to game, as well as I didn't want to spend the money on the new MacBook Pros when they increased in price the way that they did back then in 2017. Let's run a Cinebench R20 and see how this Intel Core i3 1000 NG4 CPU with 2 cores and 4 threads clocked at a base clock speed of 1.1 GHz fair in the Cinebench R20 stress test. We start off running this on battery power, and then we will test running it with the charger plugged in as well. You now hear the fans picking up to kind of their max speed and their max noise level while running the Cinebench R20 test. And let's see what the temperatures are at. Up top here I reach around 35 degrees. Around the 5 and 6 key we are at 40 degrees, so that's actually getting a little bit hot to the touch. But while feeling the keys, you don't really feel that it's hot. The keyboard area is a little bit warm, but definitely not hot to touch. Cinebench R20 landed at 723 points. And I have to say I find this pretty impressive for a 2-core 4-thread CPU. One of the simplest CPUs that Intel have in their lineup, and it actually performs pretty decently at 723 in Cinebench R20. Let's try it again plugged in just to see if it makes any difference. Cinebench R20 while being plugged in scored 665 points. So there is no improvement, rather the opposite, when I plugged it in. I don't know if this is because I ran the tests somewhat after each other, but nonetheless there is no big improvement when you are plugged in. One of the most common use cases for me with a laptop is to use it for video editing. And I downloaded and installed Davinci Resolve on the laptop, but then I quite immediately realized, okay, I'm starting up Davinci Resolve now, but how the heck do I get any of my footage into the computer? I don't have a USB-C to micro USB cable, so I can't get the footage straight in from my camera. The laptop doesn't have a USB-A port, so I can't use it with a micro USB cable from the camera. And it doesn't have a micro SD card reader, so I can just plug the SD card right in. I did realize, however, that since my Osmo Pocket has a USB-C port, I can just use a USB-C to USB-C cable and then get some footage transferred to the laptop to test it out with video editing. Transferring 7.15 gigabytes is estimated to take around 5 minutes of transfer time over USB-C. Let's import a few files to this timeline and see how it is to edit with the laptop. So this is full HD content, and the laptop actually seems to be handling it pretty well. This combo of i3 CPU and the Intel Iris Plus graphics seem to work to play back a timeline of full HD video.
However, when consuming media, as you can see here, you get quite a bit of extra black borders in kind of media consumption. However, when consuming media, as you can see here, you get quite a bit of any kind of media consumption. However, when consuming media, as you can see here, you get quite a bit of extra black borders.
Here I'm putting a title on top of 2 different video tracks in full HD, and it took a while for it to run this smoothly. Now, after some waiting time, it is playing it back completely the way it's supposed to look. So not very surprising to see that it does struggle a little bit when you start adding more layers and start adding titles, etc. But for a simple video edit, you can definitely use the MacBook Air 2020 with Davinci Resolve. When testing out the Wi-Fi, I get a download speed of 48.6 megabits per second and an upload speed of 35.2 megabits per second. This is actually a bit slower than a lot of my other Wi-Fi tests on PCs, but it's still fast enough to get a good experience with both downloads and uploads. Since there is no crystal disk mark for testing SSD benchmarks on macOS, I have to use the disk speed test from Blackmagic Design, the company that also make Davinci Resolve. When doing a few tests with the disk speed test, you get between 700 to 1000 megabytes per second write speed and about 1200 megabytes per second read speed. So this is a lot slower than many of the faster SSD that are in a Windows laptop, and I actually thought that it would be quite a bit faster, because when I've been testing my MacBook Pro from 2013, it has been considerably faster in SSD speeds than this result. Last but not least, I wanted to say something about the battery life of the laptop. And unfortunately, I haven't been spending enough time with it to have a very good opinion about the level of the battery life. I have been using it mainly plugged into power or in shorter sessions on battery power, so I've never really had to max the power of the battery out at all. I find the battery life to be just fine, but if you really need a lot of battery power, I would recommend to check out some other reviews to see a bit more info about the battery life of the laptop. However, the i3 CPU is not that power hungry, so if you are just fine with lowering the brightness a little bit of the screen, I think that this should be just fine when it comes to battery life. For many of the use cases I've been using the laptop with over the last 10 days, it has actually been working really well. However, I would definitely not use this laptop as a main driver because of the lack of ports. I use a laptop a lot for photo and video editing, and I need to be able to use a lot of ports when I use it for those purposes. I also give a lot of presentations, and even though a lot of places where you give presentations have USB-C ports to connect to a projector, sometimes you come to places where there's only HDMI. You get a machine that has a great quality feel to it, and you get a machine that is running overall very smooth and stable, but you don't get a lot of ports and you don't get a lot of performance together with your portability. But with that said, to use as an extra laptop to bring along when you want an excellent screen, typing and trackpad experience, for watching movies or listening to music on the go, or for just bringing it, for example, as a lighter productivity task machine to use with my other external screen as I showed you before. This laptop could actually work really well. I am now, after the last few years, more used to using Windows over macOS, and I actually prefer Windows in general. But I know a lot of people love macOS. If you are neutral between the two operating systems, I would just say that they both have their pros and cons, and it's just what you get used to that will serve you better. Windows 10 have come up to a really good standard, and I think that macOS is also really nice to use in most cases. The main problem I see with Mac and Mac computers is the price tag. I paid $1,250 for this one, which is the base specification with an open box. This is just way more expensive than I find acceptable in this kind of performance in a laptop. And what I can get by buying a PC for the same amount of money is just crazy. This is the reason why I in general wouldn't go for a Macintosh laptop if you don't want to spend a lot more money than you actually need on your laptop. That is it for my review of the MacBook Air 2020. I have to say I am positively surprised about the overall experience of using this machine. I didn't think that a 2-core 4-thread i3 CPU would be enough to use for any everyday or productivity tasks, but it has actually proven to be quite a decent setup with the i3, 8GB of RAM and the 256GB SSD. I would definitely recommend this laptop for anyone that is doing lighter productivity or media consumption. Just make sure that you don't need more ports than the 2 USB-C ports together with the 3.5mm headphone jack, because if you are like me, the dongle game is really annoying and I don't want to have to bring a dongle along for whatever task I would be doing, which is a lot of the things that I personally use laptops for. If you use it with a docking station, it is perfectly fine with that 2 Thunderbolt 3 port setup, and if you don't need that many ports, this could also work really well. I'm W2Best, I make videos about tech, travel and inspiration, and I will see you in the next video. Have a nice day, bye bye!